Welcome. Today we're going to be discussing the technique Hugging Pendulum and how to relate it to other elements of the American Kenpo system. So keep in mind two things. First, this is not a comprehensive list, and second, it's not family groupings. The better way to think about it is this is just different avenues or threads that you can explore so that you can draw some relationships between this technique and other elements of the system. So let's start out our relationships through an overarching principle of Kenpo, the economy of motion principle. So there are a couple different ways to think about economy of motion. One is don't make a cocker separate motion, and two is do not cross the center line without taking something with you. So let's start out with the linear version of this concept, something like a parting wings, where what's happening here is we're trying to hit with this major weapon. But what's the problem? We have gaps. We're not obeying the principle of economy of motion. So how, in the linear case, do we solve this problem? What we do is we do cocks with the opposite hand and strikes with the opposite hands in order to fill that gap. So we can also do this on the inside of the right. 5 swords is the exact same idea as parting wings, also in a linear manner. So now that we've covered that, let's move on to a circular manner and onto our base technique, Hugging Pendulum. So what does it do here? So what we want to do is we get that off the line of attack. We want to get our hands so that we can use it in their obscure zone and then hit them with things, right? But what's the problem here? Same thing that we're having the problem with parting wings, we're having the problem here with the hand. We're starting to try and come across without actually using it. If you notice, what I'm doing is I'm taking something with me. So what I'm trying to do is obey the principle of economy of motion by actually doing an insert and so that we can obey that not crossing a center line without using it. So in this case, that is a vertical center line. We can do something very similar in gathering clouds. We're doing this insert right at the beginning. Okay, so we can do that slightly different in this case, something like a leaping crane. We're coming across that exact same way because we're always cocking that hand across on the vertical center line. But we can also do it through the vertical center line. In this case, it would bring something like a glancing wing, where we're doing the hit here. We want to come across and we want to get to this hit, but we'll do this insert in the middle of it. Okay. Another way to think about this is that we're doing the vertical version with one hand. Something like a repeating mace, you'll notice that you can do it with either hand. So in this case, I can do it with the rear hand here before I get to the front hand, or I can do it with the front hand before I get to that hand. But the interesting thing about repeating mace, one more thing, is if you'll notice, I'm actually doing 2 inserts. I'm doing one at this point and one at this point because I want to draw this hand back in order to hit with it. Okay? Again, we can alternate the hands. Okay, now that we've done that, let's draw in one more. So up to now, we've been doing everything to this middle zone. We can then move this up to the high zone, and that would bring something like a Dance of Darkness. We're coming in here. We're trying to draw our hands behind them to hit them, similar to what we're doing in Hugging Pendulum. But notice again, a big gap. So what do? We do an insert here and take something with us as we go behind the opponent. So one thing you should notice up to now is that I've been very non-specific about what the target was and what the weapon was. Why? Because these are inserts. They vary based upon the situation, not upon a specific target or specific weapon. You need to do the obeying of the rule or concept rather than trying to concentrate on the specifics of what you're trying to do. That's all variable. So now that we've covered that, let's move on to a different concept. In this case, circles and what we can do to circles. So let's cover those really quick. We could start a circle and continue that circle. Start a circle, reverse the circle. Start a circle, move to a new circle, or start a circle and then move to a line. So what are we doing in Hugging Pendulum? In a Hugging Pendulum, what we're doing is we're doing this block on a circle, but then we move to a new circle. Okay? So another way to think about it, we're going from a vertical to a horizontal. We can then reverse that circle instead of keeping it onto a new circle, and that would bring in something like a unwinding pendulum. We can then do something like a continuation of that circle, do something like a retreating pendulum. Okay, we've covered everything up to now except for one, which is actually moving from a circle and going to a line. That would bring in something like a deflecting hammer. Okay, so in summary, what did we do? We talked about circles and what we can do to circles, and then we talked about obeying the principle of economy of motion, specifically crossing the center line and using it rather than not. Hope this video helps you understand the American Kenpo system just a little bit better. Thank you very much.